Hello everybody and welcome to my recap of round number 2 of the Rilton Cup. So in my last game I had a draw against a candidate master and I was feeling really happy, but then I checked my pairing for round 2, and every chess player knows the fear that you get when you see your opponent is born 2010 or later. I was playing against a kid who was 2000 rated and was born in 2011, so he was only 13 years old, already higher rated than me. And yeah, this is kind of terrifying because kids are typically improving really fast. A lot of the times they are underrated and they are just so good. So for me, I was so scared to play against a kid, but I was also really excited because I got the white pieces, and you know what, I had nothing to lose. It was going to be a really fun game. So I played, my opponent plays the Sicilian defense. They play c5, and here I just develop my knight, so I bring it out to f3, controlling the center with this. He then plays the move e6. This is just opening up the bishop, maybe preparing to push this pawn to d5 in the future, and just taking control of the light squares. So here I push my pawn to d4, and my plan is just to trade off and put this knight in the middle of the board where it can control a lot of squares in the center. So we trade, and then he plays the move a6. And this move a6, it's going to stop this knight from ever coming into the b5 square and infiltrating on the dark squares. And it also prepares maybe later for my opponent to push this pawn to b5 and start attacking on the queen side. So here I just like to play it pretty solid, and I play the move bishop to d3. And this is just to develop a piece, get ready to castle, and also keep some nice defense of this e4 pawn, because in the future my opponent's going to want to play the move d5, and I just want to make sure that that's going to be defended in the future. So I put my bishop here, and next he plays the move knight to f6, and here he's attacking my pawn, but I've already defended it with bishop d3, so this is fine. There's nothing to worry about. Okay, so next I just go forward with my plan and I castle, I get the king out of the center, and now it's safe over here. I will note that my opponent was taking quite a bit of time in the opening. Usually when you're playing against kids, like, the stereotype is that they prepare a lot, they memorize crazy lines in the openings, but my opponent was taking his time in the opening, so it seemed like he wasn't super prepared for what I was playing, and he was just using his, using his knowledge about chess to play what he thought was good moves, which is what most of us are doing, but most kids come in really prepared. So after this, my opponent plays the move queen to c7, just developing another piece, controlling the c file. Maybe at some point we could create a battery along this diagonal and target the h2 pawn. But for now, it's just bringing another piece into play. So here I decide to just develop another piece and bring my knight to c3, making sure that the center is really well defended, and that if he's ever pushing d5, that I can just capture it. So now he plays the move d6, and here with the move d6, this is just controlling some dark squares over here. It stops me from taking control of the e5 or c5 squares. And next he's probably just going to play the bishop to e7 and then castle on the king side. And next I decide to play the move rook to e1. In this kind of setup, I usually just try and put my pieces on the e-file and play a little bit solid, maybe push e5 in the future if I want to, or maybe even f4. It was actually possible to push f4 straight away, but I always get a little bit scared of doing this so early in the game when my king is directly lined up with this knight along the diagonal. It feels really risky. Even though there's really no immediate threat, it just feels so scary opening up the king this early. So instead I just play rook to e1, and here my opponent puts his bishop out to e7, and then I bring my queen up to e2. So now we've almost got all of our pieces out. I mean, I still need to develop this bishop, but at the moment it's sort of doing a nice job of protecting the b2 pawn. Like, if I ever, if I move the bishop away with bishop e3, maybe a slight problem is that this pawn over here is going to be a little bit weak, but definitely it's not too much of a worry. So next I just move the queen out, and then he castles. So after this, I think for a while, and I wasn't exactly sure what to do. I probably should have just developed my bishop and played bishop to e3. But I just started worrying that my bishop was going to become a target here. Like maybe at some point the knight was going to jump into the g4 square, attacking my bishop, and then I would have to move it back. Or maybe they would, somehow start targeting this pawn on b2 and it would be really weak. So I think I sort of started to panic a little bit, and I didn't know where I wanted to put this bishop. I was like, where does it want to go? I wanted to have the bishop on f4, but this knight is on d4. Like if I play bishop f4 right now, I'm just losing a piece. So in my mind, I was like, okay, I want to put the bishop out in this active diagonal, target the d6 pawn, and put some pressure on the queen on c7. So I decided if I move the knight to a square where it's blockading the b pawn so that it's less targetable, like it's not as weak, and also moves out of the way of the fork, then I can develop my bishop to f4. So this was my thinking behind this move, even though it looks a little bit strange. And I also thought I'm controlling some of the dark squares and stopping any potential checks on c5 if I'm ever pushing f4. So that was my idea behind this move, but I don't think it was a very good one. So now he plays the move b6, and this shows that he wants to put his bishop on the b7 square, and this is really going to be quite a strong bishop actually. Like if you don't play b6, then it's a little bit harder to get the bishop out. It has to go to d7 and then to c6. So this gives a nice quick way to develop the bishop and control the center. So yeah, he plays this move, and then I start to think, okay, what will I do here? I still haven't developed my bishop, so I think now is time to develop the bishop. And here comes a really big moment in the position. So I take some time on this move, and I was thinking about going to f4, but I was thinking maybe I go to g5 first and provoke this move h6 and then put the bishop back on f4, like creating a little bit of a target on the king side with this h6 pawn. So that's what I was thinking, and I also thought we'll put some more pressure along this diagonal. So I was really deciding bishop f4 or bishop g5, and I eventually decided to go with bishop g5, and then my opponent plays h6. And here I started to calculate for a while because I was like, there is something that looks like a potential tactic here, and I saw this really, really long line which I wanted to calculate and see if it worked. Now, it doesn't work, but I took a long time working out whether it did. So what I was calculating was taking on f6, and the bishop takes back. Then I push the pawn to e5. So this is attacking the bishop here. So you have to do something about this. And after the bishop takes, I had this move queen to e4. And here, when I was looking at this position, I was like, okay, this is going to be a fork. This is just still in my calculation, by the way. So I'm calculating this whole thing in my mind. And I was like, okay, so we're threatening checkmate, and we're also threatening the rook on a8. So we're going to be winning something. After he goes g6 to stop the checkmate, then I get to take over here. And then I was like, okay, but now he can go bishop b7, and my queen can go to the a7 square, but my queen is getting trapped after knight c6. But then I thought maybe after knight c6, I can go for something with a counterattack and go knight b5 to free the queen. So if they take, I was going to escape out on the a3 square. But then after a long time of calculating, I realized that in this line, the queen was still getting trapped with rook to a8. So I was like, okay, that was a big waste of time. I was looking at all this stuff, like if they take here, then I'm taking the queen. That was the idea with knight b5. And otherwise, if the queen moves somewhere, it's deflected from defending the pawn. So I was going to be grabbing a rook and some stuff, and I was thinking, oh, this almost works, but then rook a8, and it was not working. So I spent a long time calculating, and then I was like, okay, it doesn't work. So now we go back to the drawing board, and after a 10-minute think, or even longer, 15-minute think, I just put the bishop back one square. So this is a very long think for a very simple move, but I think it was important to calculate. Okay, so next my opponent just plays a simple move, and he develops his knight to the d7 square. And this knight is probably going to head to either the e5 or c5 squares. So yeah, this is a good place to put it. You could have also put it on the c6 square. Maybe he didn't like the fact that it would block off his bishop a little bit. But yeah, this is, pretty standard move. We're both a little low on time here. We're only on move 12, but we've already used almost half of our time. And we don't get any extra time until we make it to move 40. So the time management is going to be pretty important for the next few moves, I will say that. Okay, so after knight d7, I'm thinking of a plan, and I decide that I want to, get a little bit of space over on the queen side, so I play the move a4. And this is because I just want to stop any ideas of him pushing forward, maybe getting the knight to b6, c4, this sort of thing, gaining more space on the queen side. I'm just going to sort of control this b5 square and stop him pushing anything over there. So I play this move, and then he plays bishop to b7. And I decide after a while to put my rook on the d1 square. And then I'm just thinking that my rook places a bit more pressure again on this d6 pawn. Okay, and then my opponent takes 23 minutes on the next move. This is a really, really long thing. I don't know exactly what he was calculating. I didn't ask him. Maybe he was thinking about 95, but wasn't sure about it. There was probably a lot of things that he was considering right now, but after 23 minutes, he plays the move rook f to d8. And this is a totally fine move. It's a good move, but it just took him a really long time to do it. So now he's with 30 minutes on move 14. So he has to make 26 moves within the next 30 minutes to reach time control, which is the added time that you get at move 40. So after this move, I do notice his time is getting a little bit low, but he's still got plenty of time to reach time control as long as he makes a few. So here I decide to just make a little bit of a prophylactic move, I guess. I just my pawn up to h3. This avoids any back rank issues in the future. Also means my bishop can maybe retreat along this diagonal back on the h2 square if it really needs to. So yeah, this was just a simple move, and I thought it was a way to improve my position without doing anything drastic, because the problem with this position is there's really nothing crazy that I can do. Like, all my pieces are pretty much exactly where they want to be, and I can just make a few improving pawn moves. Like maybe I could have moved my queen up to e3, but I was kind of liking where it was on e2, where it put some pressure on the a6 pawn. So yeah, I play h3, and again my opponent takes a really long think. He takes another over 10-minute think, and he decides to play the move knight to e8. And this is again a pretty good move, but I did notice that it sort of takes away some of his pressure on the king side. So I decided that as a result, I was going to try and put some pressure on the queen side and try and play over that, because I was worried before that if I start, attacking over here, my opponent's going to attack me over here and I don't have a lot of defense. So here I decided on a plan, and I decided I would go a5. And the idea was that if he takes the pawn, my rook is just going to swing over here, and then I'll take this pawn either with the knight or the rook, maybe put pressure on the bishop. So this was my plan here. And instead, he pushes forward, which is also what I expected. But I created this idea that I was going to maneuver this knight on c3 up to the b4 square, controlling the d5 and c6 squares, and maybe push c4. And I felt from here I would have a really nice attack on the a6 pawn. However, black is a little bit better, so I don't know. But in this position, the funny thing is I was feeling quite good about my position. I was like, this is pretty decent, but apparently I'm just a bit worse. I didn't know, but I thought I had a nice chance. Okay. So I decide to put my knight back on a2, and then I'm going to bring it up to the b4 square. That's my plan. And I'm also just clearing the c file so that I can push over here. So he puts his rook on c8, sort of trying to guard against the c4 push, and then I put my rook on c1. And here I'm preparing to push c4 and trying to attack my opponent down the c file. And now he's getting really, really low on time. He only has 10 minutes left to go, and he has to make 22 moves before time control. You're probably in the background. Oh no, okay, you're not. You're good. So yeah, so he thinks again for a few minutes, even though he only has 10 minutes on the clock, and he plays the move queen to b8. And I was kind of expecting this move because it feels a little bit scary to leave your queen on the same file as what I'm about to just open up and put the rook over there to attack, because I'm planning to push c4 and then take on b5 and attack the queen. So it feels a little bit scary, I think. So he moves his queen away out of the attack, and now I play c4. and he takes, and I take back. And then here he plays the move knight to e5. And this is a really important moment. My opponent only has 7 minutes left on the clock, but this pawn is actually kind of hanging. But there's still a few things I needed to calculate. So I just thought for a while, if I take on a6, then he takes back and the queen takes, it's possible for him to capture the knight. But then I would be able to take on c8. And then if he went and took the other knight, trying to get two pieces for the rook, I would be able to capture on d8, then on e5, and I have this nice move just to pick up another piece. And after the queen takes, rook d1, and then after this, I'm just going to be taking the bishop. And here, queen takes instead. And here I would just be up the exchange in the endgame, and then I also have this pass b pawn, which is really nice. So this was what I calculated first. So I was like, okay, so he can't go in and take both of these knights. But there's also other options as well. Like you didn't have to take back. You know, you can take on c1. Sorry, after this, you could take on c1. And then I would just have to take back with the a knight so that the knights defend each other, rather than with the b knight, because then the queen can come in and take the b2 pawn. So I had to be a little bit careful about this. And so yeah, I was calculating for quite a while, and then I was like, okay, I think I can just take this pawn. So I took it, and then it is best to just play this trade and then move the knight to c7. And then I will offer the queen trade, and you have to play knight d3 here. And it gets a little bit crazy. Like this position gets super wild. And white is a little better, but it's nothing super crazy. But instead, my opponent plays knight to c7. And now he has only 1 minute on the clock. And here I take, and then I put my knight on d4. The queen was attacking the knight, so I move it. And my idea is that I want to put the knight on c6. Like first I want to take this knight and then put the knight on c6 where it can target the rook and the bishop and attack everything. And then my opponent makes a mistake. In low time, he makes a mistake, and then I take on e5. And if he's taking back, I go here and I fork everything. Like, you know, if you move the queen somewhere, then I'm taking over here with check. So everything is under attack there. So my opponent decides instead to take on a5. And now I just play knight c6 anyway, attacking the bishop, attacking the queen. He takes on a2. And then I take on e7 with check. And whatever you do here, I'm going to take this rook in the corner. And after he takes my bishop, I'll be taking the knight on c7. So I would be up a rook and winning this game. So I win in the end. It was a really crazy game. And I think it was just in the end that my opponent used too much time because he was really, really low on time when it got to a really complicated position. But yes, I now have 1.5 out of 2 points from the second round. I hope you guys enjoyed the recap, and thanks for watching. Bye!